Well, next, it's one of the few councils in the country not run by a traditional political party. Uttlesford, the area around Stansted Airport in Essex, has a majority of councillors from a residents group elected 3 years ago on a platform of opposing development in the area. Now it's had some of those planning powers taken away for rejecting too many projects. What does it say about local democracy? Russell Hookey reports.
Great Samford near Saffron Walden is a village largely unchanged for decades. It's part of Uttlesford district, whose ruling group R4U, or Residents for Uttlesford, had promised to resist overdevelopment. But it's a policy which has now led the government to strip the council of planning powers.
So what the government is saying is that we've failed because we've lost too many appeals. We haven't really. We've won more appeals than we've actually lost. And they keep moving the goalposts for the numbers that we're allowed. And if we think about it logically, that we've heard, haven't we, this government go build, build, build. We've all seen and read about the donations from developers. I think it's over 11 million. We don't dance with the donors here, absolutely not. But we will work with developers to get the right homes in the right place.
The authority will no longer be able to decide on schemes of 10 or more homes. Instead, the government's planning inspectorate will determine if they go ahead.
Uttlesford district is largely rural in nature, without any large conurbations. In fact, the biggest towns are here in Saffron Walden and also Great Dunmow. Many of the buildings are picture postcard, and residents want them to stay that way. But at the same time, it has an expanding population and homes are needed for young families. Opposition groups say that the council is failing to address both those needs.
The problem is that among the major developments turned down by the council, including the expansion of Stansted Airport, too many are subsequently allowed to go ahead on appeal, exceeding the number set out in government criteria.
I think it's arrogance. We all want to work together for the benefit of the council, but the administration, not only do they refuse to listen to officers, but they also refuse to accept any responsibility, and our the opposition members calling on them to change their approach falls on deaf ears.
We were elected to represent the residents. Most of our members live in the ward that they represent, and we will always do our absolute best to do it right. As for arrogance, absolutely not. As for not following the law, absolutely not. It is a national policy framework, isn't it? It's within the law, and law is open to interpretation.
The government says the current arrangement will remain in place for the foreseeable future. But Uttlesford District Council says it's determined to claw back its powers. It's appointing new personnel to oversee the planning process and says it'll be requesting a monthly review of the government's decision.
Duncan, what does it say about local democracy if these councillors are elected on a basis of doing one thing, try to do it, and then told they can't by government?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting situation, isn't it? I mean, I won't sit on the fence on this at all, Emma. I came through the ranks of district council and really elected to serve North Norfolk. I was born and raised in the area. So, you know, I'm a real local MP, and local powers for local people is something I believe in enormously. And I think that planning is one of the most emotive situations that I'm sure Rachel will also say that we deal with as MPs, and it still comes through our inboxes. So I do believe that people should be.
But what if the local
those.
powers don't fit in with what the government
Well,
want
the
to do?
problem is that you've got to have a lot of responsibility when you use those powers, and there has to be a balance. You do have to pass planning applications, we do have to keep building homes, but they have to be in the right places, they have to be sympathetic to the area you're building in, and you can't reject every planning application that comes through. So it's a very nuanced, balanced issue to get right, and it's hopefully going to be put right with the planning reforms the government brings in later this year.
Rachel, what do you make of it? Do you think it's a case of Notting by backyard, that they don't want any planning applications to go through, and therefore that's why they've come into conflict with the government and had their powers taken away?
I'm not too familiar with the details of this, but I do agree that local people should have a say over developments in their areas, particularly when there's over 1 million homes that are not built, that have areas that have been granted planning permission. So I can understand why people get very frustrated when they want to have a say over what's going on in their area on specific applications. And in fact, I've tabled a bill in Parliament to maintain that exact opportunity for people to have their say in those ways. The planning white paper, I think, is paused because I think there are issues with it, because the government's proposals were still quite top-down, decide once, and reducing the amount of say that local people had. I don't think that's very democratic, and I would like to see more input from local people.
Stephen, of course, you're the leader of the council, the City Council in Chelmsford. Is the approach still too top-down if you try and make a decision that perhaps national government don't like the idea of?
Yeah, well, Rachel's right that the planning white paper has many flaws in it, and the government were proposing to centralise and take away powers from local councils. But the issue is simply that we have a housing crisis in this country, and we do need to build houses. But residents are right to be concerned about where they go and whether they've got the right infrastructure. And certainly in Chelmsford, that's very much on our minds, that we must build the houses that we need so that families have got somewhere to live. Lots of young people in their 20s and 30s have no idea where they are going to get the home that they want and then they deserve, and they want to live in the area where they've grown up often. They don't want to have to move to another part of the country to find somewhere they can afford. So we need lots of new houses, but they've got to be affordable, and this is one of the key issues. We haven't built anything like enough affordable housing and social rent housing for 30 years, and we need to get on with it. And the government needs to give local councils the powers to ensure that we deliver over 100,000 affordable homes a year. That's what we need as a country, and we're not building anything like it. And we need that, and we need the infrastructure like the schools, the doctors, and leisure facilities that go with that. That's really essential, that we build communities, not just housing estates.